The first couple of questions come in were about the awakening process, and we actually received many questions from different angles about the awakening process. Here's the first one. I've tried to focus on presence and also surrendering to what is for many years, mostly through your teachings and retreats. Recently, I have begun to sense more presence and less thought. My question is that I seem to have less feeling towards others and things, a lack of bond, so to speak. I'm present, but I feel less connected emotionally to people in my life. Is this part of the process?
Okay, well, that's a very interesting question. Before answering a question, whether you are asking yourself a question or somebody's asking you a question, it's always good to just have a moment of stillness. It doesn't have to be long, even if it's just 3 or 4 or 5 seconds, 10 seconds. If the answer, so give yourself an opportunity to go a little bit deeper where you connect with the stillness, the unconditioned consciousness, because then there's the possibility that a fresh, alive, creatively alive answer will come rather than an answer that comes from the accumulated knowledge of your mind or some kind of mental reactive pattern. So humans connect with each other, relate to each other on different levels. We could almost say different dimensions. And basically, there are 4 levels or dimensions through which human beings connect with each other. The first is very obvious. The first thing when you meet a person is to do with sensory perception. So you see the external form, the physical form of that person. So the first level of interaction is the interaction on the level of the physical form. Now that may just be noticing how a person looks, what this person looks like physically, the whole body, the face, facial expression. So you're looking at that person, perhaps it's pleasing to look at that person. The person is considered good looking or beautiful. And then on the same level, of course, there is sexual attraction can happen, which also belongs to this level, connecting with the other on the physical level. And often many relationships start with that kind of connection. Often it's of a sexual kind. And that, in some cases, remains the only level on which 2 humans connect. And if that remains the only level on which 2 humans connect, the relationship is not likely to last for too long. So other levels have to come into play in order to have a more satisfying relationship. And of course, the next level is the emotional level. So you have certain feelings about the person that you are with. And if they are extreme, then it's maybe called falling in love, which some people might call loving, but really it's falling in love with another person. This is a very strong, overwhelming, sometimes overwhelming emotional need for the other person that can be quite euphoric for a while and can give you the delusion that you have now found the fulfillment of your life, that you've now found the person that will make you happy. And there's absolutely nobody else in the world who could ever replace that person. So that's a very strong emotional bond can develop, that kind. That again lasts for a while. It usually comes to an end soon after you start moving in with somebody, living together. Then that is no longer satisfying, that you fall out of love unless you go deeper. So if there's then also a mental connection, that would be very helpful. So that's the next level, where you connect with another person on the level of the mind, which starts with a simple thing like having things in common that you can talk about. Interesting conversations, stimulating conversations, interests. That makes for a more fulfilling relationship than just physical, or even just physical and emotional. So that's. However, the mental level can also mean that the ego comes in, because if you identify, as you probably know, if you identify with the mind, that means that's the ego. The ego has arisen. So when you relate to another on the mental level, the good side of it is that you have interesting conversations, you have things in common, and so on. That's great. It could also mean that you have a certain image, a mental image of the other person. And this mental image of who the other person is, perhaps the mental image of this person is beautiful or is admired by many other people, and you have this mental image that you love, that it complements you, and you want to add this person to your sense of identity. This happens very strongly if the other person has high status or is wealthy or famous or very popular, or anything else that makes up the mind-created sense of identity. So you can then you can add this mental image of this person to who you are in order to enhance your mental image. So you bring it, you attract it. That is the egoic part of relating to another person on the mental level. And that, of course, also means it is ultimately that kind of connectedness is ultimately delusional, because those images are not who we are. So that's something to look out for. So those three come into play in most normal human interactions: the physical, the emotional, the mental, and often they operate together to a greater or lesser degree. One or the other may predominate, and as if a couple live together, as they grow older, together, they grow old together, then the physical perhaps decreases in importance. The mental may become more important because having something to talk about with the other person can become important as you grow older. The emotional may still be present or may no longer be present. The most important dimension, however, is the spiritual dimension. That certainly does not come into all relationships, because it depends on whether there has been at least some degree of spiritual awakening in the other person. So that's the spiritual dimension is the most important dimension, without which ultimately you cannot have a truly fulfilling relationship. Now, what the spiritual dimension is, I just described a little bit the physical, the emotional, the mental. What the spiritual dimension is not easily described. It requires for you not to be completely identified with your mind, not to be completely identified with the emotions, not to be completely identified with your physical form, so that you have access, at least to some degree, to certain depths within you, which we sometimes describe as stillness, described as a sense of spacious awareness. And when that comes into the relationship, then we can call it transcendent dimension has come in, and all the others, the physical, the mental and the emotional, now become secondary, and they're all contained within the greater space of the transcendent or spiritual dimension. And so you're able to be aware in the presence of the other person, to be present with the other person, not continuously impose mind, thought, judgment on the other person, not relate exclusively on the physical or sexual, emotional or mental levels, because ultimately those three are not enough for a truly fulfilling relationship. So when the spiritual dimension comes in, the three others still have a certain importance. They don't disappear completely, of course, they may still be there. But even if there are certain elements that are not working totally well on the mental, emotional, or physical, which may be the case when the relationship lasts for a long time, there's still the transcendent dimension, which becomes of true importance. The only thing that's ultimately important is to have that transcendent dimension in your relationship, to be able to be with the other person, to look at the other person, to listen to the other person, to sense their beingness or presence, because you can sense your own beingness and presence. That transcends the body, that transcends the mind, that transcends the emotions, which still may operate, but they are no longer in the forefront. They no longer totally dominate the relationship. And you no longer look to the physical, mental, and emotional for ultimate satisfaction or happiness in the other, because you have found something of greater importance, something deeper, more true, more fundamental. So that is the most important thing. Now, the question is, yes, it does affect the way in which you relate to the other person on the other levels. So on the emotional level, this was the question was specifically about the emotional level, the certain clinging quality that emotions have tends to no longer be there. You may still have certain emotions towards the other person, but they're not as strong or as powerful anymore, because there is a sense of spaciousness around the emotion. And if you're only used to relating, you have related all your life on the physical, mental, emotional only, and then the spiritual comes in, that can be at first disconcerting, because the emotional connectedness no longer seems as strong. And that is true. It may still be there, but something else has come in that is actually deeper, more vital than the emotional connection. But when you look at it from the point of view of your mind and what you know from your past, then it seems that, I don't feel that emotional connectedness anymore. But if you go more deeply into it, you can sense there is a deep sense of oneness with the other, but it does not have this clinging quality that emotions have. It almost sounds paradoxical that there's a sense of, as I call it, recognition of the other as ultimately yourself. It's always the true love arises through the transcendent dimension, the spiritual dimension, and true love is the recognition of the other as essentially yourself, which means the essence of the other is consciousness. The essence of who you are is consciousness, the light of consciousness. In essence, I am the light of consciousness, not a person. That's the physical, mental, emotional aspects of the person. The transcendent dimension is the transcendence of the person. So when I know myself, as the mind becomes still, and in that stillness, all that remains is just an aware presence, a still, spacious, aware presence. And you know yourself as that, beyond any concepts. And then you look at another human being, you are with another human being, and you can sense the same dimension in the other, even if they cannot sense it in themselves. And sometimes you sensing it in the other can make them aware of that dimension in themselves. That does happen. But that recognition of oneness is not there's no grasping in it. There is a certain, it sounds almost paradoxical, there is a certain detachment that comes with that recognition, because you're no longer grasping at the form of the other. You don't need to perpetuate the form identity of the other. So there's this grasping, that's otherwise they're grasping to the physical. You cling to the physical, clinging to the emotions, identifying with the emotions, clinging to all the thoughts, identifying with the thoughts that make up what people consider to be an interesting relationship, but that's ultimately not a deep relationship. So there's a paradoxical quality that comes in. On the one hand, there's a true knowing the other as yourself. But there's also a detachment, because you have gone beyond the form within yourself, and you've gone beyond the form of the other. So there's a detachment as far as the form identity of the other is concerned. But that is replaced by something deeper. But if you only remember how your relationship was before, then it almost might seem, if you interpret it from the point of view of the mind, by the way, the mind cannot understand ultimately presence. If you interpret it from the point of view of the mind, it may sometimes seem that you've lost something, but you haven't lost anything. of true importance. And emotions may still arise, as I said. Physical attraction may still be there, connecting us on the physical level. Mental sharing, of course, can also be still part of that. And yet there's something deeper that transcends all that. And that's where the true meeting occurs. So as you go more deeply into that, you become comfortable with this absence of the neediness, the clinging, the attachment, which is mental, emotional, physical. When there's no transcendent there, the mental, emotional, physical, there's an attachment to that and the other. And that's all part of so-called normal relationships. So the physical, mental, emotional, they still operate, but there is no longer the attachment to those levels. That's a difference. So there is a sense of detachment, and yet they still operate and can be enjoyed without the attachment to them, which also, by the way, means in the case of the mind, if many relationships become dysfunctional because there's no longer an understanding on the level of the mind. They don't agree with their respective mental positions. And so that leads to very often breakdown in relationships, an enormous amount of conflict and drama, just disagreements, fighting about relatively insignificant things. That means you are trapped on the level of mind. You're identified with your mental positions. You're defending your mental positions as if you were defending your life, because you've identified with mental positions, which means your sense of self is in your thought forms, and then the other has different thought forms. And so when you disagree, you feel you're attacking each other, and then the emotions come in. And this happens, it's quite normal for this to happen in the absence of the transcendent dimension in relationships. And some couples even think that a relationship must have this drama, because otherwise it's not a true relationship. We're not fighting anymore, so we're not having a true relationship anymore. That is what many couples believe, but of course it means the transcendent is missing. When the transcendent dimension is there, hopefully in both partners, then the others can be enjoyed. The physical, the mental, the emotional can be enjoyed, but there's a detachment. So they're no longer the central focus of your relationship. So, and then there's the transcendent, and that is something that you takes a while to settle into that and realize the depth of it. For a while you may still have a memory of something when you were completely identified with the emotional, mental, or physical, and think, oh, that, and that's fine. It's something that you have outgrown, that identification. So there's nothing wrong with it. So the transcendent means that a true lovingness has arisen. And the transcendent dimension is not, by the way, it does not necessarily mean it only arises in intimate relationships. Once you connect with the transcendent dimension within yourself, it operates in all relationships in your life, even short relationships, like a short interaction with another person because you're buying something or selling something, or whatever it may be. And even there you have that presence, and you sense the other person's presence beyond their personality, beyond their person. And so it's beautiful. So allow this transcendent dimension that has arisen in you to deepen and settle into, and then you'll see that it is of far more significant, and there's a far greater connectedness beyond attachment, as you go more deeply into the transcendent.